Nuaimh go léir cóide agus sáfáilte ród. Welcome to Be My Guest with me, Mary Honan, on Lear Media TV, supporting the Samaritans Limerick and Tipperary, Clare's Wish Foundation in Limerick, and Deal Animal Rescue in West Limerick. Now, I have to say, my superbly fabulous, magnificent, wonderful guest today, I'm not at all biased, is an extremely renowned soccer player, but I'm not going to be really talking to Joe Waters today about soccer. I'm going to be talking about more personal things like Limerick, living in Limerick and moving to the UK as a 15-year-old and then to America and all that he misses from Limerick, because I want to keep it personal because Joe is my cousin and I'm very honoured to say he's my cousin and always have been. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Mary. How are you today?
I'm grand. You were on the other night with the boys on the sports team, and I was in the corner listening. They won't let me on the show because they don't think women know anything about sport.
They wouldn't want me saying that around my wife and daughters, I can tell you that.
I know it's shocking, but you know you're just beating your head off the stone wall. Joe, you grew up in Garryowen like I did, and what was it like when you went to Bernie, your mother, and Ned, your father, and told them that you were going off to England to play soccer, because you were only 15 and coming from a small, close-knit community of Garryowen, that couldn't have been easy. I know it wasn't easy on my mother when she was hearing that you were moving. She thought you'd starve.
Yeah, there was little fear of that happening to me, to be honest. I think, I knew that there was interest from across the water in me, and Leicester had shown an interest in me, and that was just at the time when I was really getting interested in football and personalities in football, or soccer, as we call it over here and over there. I remember one day that Waterford had won the league and they drew Manchester United in the European Cup back in 67, 68. 68, I want to say, maybe it was 69. But they were playing them, and instead of playing them at Kilcoen Park, they decided they'd switch the game to Lansdowne Road.
Yeah.
Be a much bigger payday, which happened on a regular basis. So I decided I wanted to go and see the game. And my next door neighbour, Terry O'Donoghue, went with me. My dad, Ned, worked on the railway, as you know, and he got us a free pass to go up there. We had lunch. We ate in the railway club up in Dublin, and then got the bus out to Lansdowne Road, and where we promptly hopped the fence because we didn't have a ticket, and we were hiding it. There's a backfield or used to be in the old days. There used to be a backfield in Lansdowne Road, a bit like Tooman Park, where the younger age teams used to play, or the club teams might play games. And we were running across that and found the bathrooms, and we were hiding out in the bathrooms. Well, very soon the Gardaí were coming along and banging on bathroom doors and knocking them open. So we all got kicked out and we're all running back to the other side. But of course, as soon as the match started, we're back over the wall again. And in those days, people would help each other to get up and over. So we got in anyway. And I eventually at Lansdowne Road worked my way down to the front. There used to be a wall around the pitch at that time. And I got right to the front on the wall. And, probably not 5 yards away from me, less than 5 yards, was George Best and Bobby Charlton and Nobby Stiles and all guys that I knew later and played with and or played against. And after the game, Waterford lost 3-1, I think, that day. But after the game, Terry and I came back down home and got in the train back down home. I walked into the house, and you walk into the house and turn right to go to the living room.
Yeah.
And my mother was sitting by the fire reading the paper.
That's
And
true.
she said, well, how was it, Joseph? She always called me Joseph. She never called me Joe. And I said, Mom, all I want to be is a professional soccer player. And she said,
Joe, that must... Sorry.
She says, okay, Joseph, your dinner is in the oven. Go and get it. So I went and got my dinner and sat in the kitchen, ate my dinner, and that was it. And from that day forward, they never discouraged me, never said I shouldn't go.
No.
All they did was support me in every way that I could, or that they could. I mean, I went on trial to Leicester City. We didn't have a suitcase, so the Bennetts across the road from us, Mr. Bennett, Willie, used to be a train driver, and he had a suitcase because he'd have to do overnights in sometimes. So I borrowed the suitcase, and that's what I carried my stuff in when I went to Leicester on trial. So it was kind of an avenue event when I went. Everybody pitched in, so it was.
I remember my mother saying, "I can't understand how Bernie is letting him off. I really can't understand it. He's 15. He'll die over there." My mother was totally, she had you complete. There was no way he's going to survive. But did you feel that going over with Ronnie Walsh, you went over with, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
That having somebody of your contemporary, somebody you knew going over, that made that journey that bit easier for you. You weren't really going over not knowing anyone.
Right. And that was the most important thing, and having that and having that company with you, somebody from home. Ronnie tells the story and swears by it to this day, that we went to mass in the Catholic Church Cathedral in Leicester, and as usual, I was always late. So Ronnie was up and off to mass, and I'm falling behind, a few minutes behind, and Ronnie was in the front, down the front of the church, and I was at the back standing. And when mass was over, Frank O'Farrell came out, and he saw me at the back of the church, and he said, "Oh, hi, Joe. It's good to see you at mass," and what have you. Frank was a very devout Catholic, and Ronnie swears to this day that because he saw me at the back of the church, that was the only reason he signed me.
Because he thought another devout Catholic.
Yeah, right. So, and Ronnie said, you were late, and I was early, and it didn't do me any good. So.
It's always you weren't late, you were actually on time, because if you had been earlier, you wouldn't have been noticed, so you were on time. But Joe, it has to be said, you didn't lick it off the ground, as my mother used to say. Your father, your grandfather, your uncle, they were all so involved. Your uncle Mick was one of the founders of Pike Rovers. Your grandfather was the chairman at the time, and later president. But he was also the president, wasn't he, of the NACA, the National Cross Country Athletics?
Yes, and he was president of Limerick AC, which I did not know.
Yeah.
One day I got Tony Hayden was our coach at Wembley Rovers, and he was down in the avenue one day, and he was looking for players. He knew I was at Pike, but he said, "Hey," he said, "there's a cross country tryout in Cardavin on Sunday." He said, "Would you be interested in going?" And some of the other lads Ronnie that went, some of the other lads, I forget who they were now. And the first six places got certificates. So I made the top six anyway. And I don't know if you remember, but Tommy Cleary's barbershop was right next to the station, Limerick Station. As you came out on the left-hand side, looking up towards Hyde Road, there was where the flats were there. There was a row of shops underneath, and his business was right there. And I went to pick up my certificate because that's where you had to go. And he says to me, he says, Waters, he says, are you anything to Jack Waters? I said, yeah. I said, he's my grandfather. He said, well, he's the president of this club. And I had no clue at the time what Grandad's involvement was in anything really, you know. But I knew he was involved with Pike and what have you. I didn't know all the other things that he was involved in.
Yeah, I remember my mum always saying that he has to pay for the because in those days in the Pike very few were working, and Uncle Jack was a fitter in the railway, and he had a job, and he used to pay for the buses, and Auntie Nellie used to be there, and all the women with big practically buckets of holy water, and they blessing the bus. And apparently the bus was in such a condition that there's no way it would have been passed now for people to actually get on board. But the players used to go from match to match, and he used to pay for the buses. But he really thought seemingly that you were going to go down the route of athletics, and you took the route best known to the Waters family, which was soccer.
Yeah, and it was funny because my mother always encouraged me to go and see. We used to go up and see the grandparents every Sunday anyway, after mass. But when I started running, you know, you go from mass and then you'd meet the bus, and the minibus would take you to the event. And I was doing pretty well at the time. I was winning some cross country races. I was doing very well. Grandad Jack started taking an interest in it, and he says to me, one day he says to me, how do you run? He says, what do you run in? And I said, well, I run bare feet. And he says, what? And I said, yeah. I said, I run bare feet. I said, sometimes at night when I get home, my mother is picking thorns out of my feet from thistles and what have you. And he says, oh, geez, he says, we can't be having that. So he bought me my first pair of spikes so that I'd be able to run in that. And he had great hopes that I would stick with that. And the irony was that Mum worked in the Christian Brothers at the time with my Auntie Dolly, who lived up in Bengal Terrace, and they worked in the kitchen in Sexton Streets for the brothers. And Brother O'Neill, who was in charge of the athletic side of it, said to my mother one day when I was stuck with the decision of what I was going to do and how I was going to do it, and he said, Mrs. Waters, he says, encourage Joe to stay with the athletics. He says, because if he does, he'll travel the world if he does it. And little did he know that I was going to be fortunate enough anyway with the decision I made to visit quite a few countries anyway. So
do you think, Joe, that having been such a fast athlete, having been so athletic as well as being soccer orientated or football orientated, do you think that helped, that was such a great advantage? Because I'm thinking of that famous 2 goals that you scored for Leicester City against Queen's Park Rangers. I mean, I don't think anybody other than an athlete, somebody with extreme speed, could have actually covered the ground you did from your own half into Queen's Park Rangers half to score the goals that you did score. And I think the fact that it didn't go to waste, the fact that you had spent so long running. so much time in athletics as well. You bring
No, I
up
mean, it definitely was a huge help to me. And I mean, I'd always been fit because, you know, I played all sports. I was always active. I mean, in our house, you know, when the weather was good, you're fed and you're thrown outside to go and play and do your thing. So it was, it was fitness, you know, and the irony of what you're talking about there was that if you look at the film closely, you'll see that my socks are down around my ankles, and just prior to the second goal, I was cramping up a little bit, and the manager Jimmy Bloomfield was getting Mike Stringflow, who was the sub, ready to go on for me, and just as that happened, QPR get the corner and it's cleared, and it happens to be on my head, and I headed towards Steve Earle. It was my job to be at the top of the box for anything that came out there. And it came right to my area. So I run onto it. I head it to Steve Earle, and then I just take off. And Steve gets a great touch on it to get it past their last defender. And he's heading off into QPR territory, and I'm galloping. I'm following him for a second, and then I realize where he's going, and I change direction to the other side to separate myself from the defenders. And then he slips the ball through me, and it through to me, and I get on the end of it and lift it over the goalkeeper. And Jimmy Bloomfield turned to Mike Stringflow and he said, "Mick, sit down. He's all right." So,
you know, Joe, I think I told you the other day, I was coming home on a flight. I can't remember where I was. I think I was judging a dance competition, and the guy behind me and his wife started talking to us as we were waiting to disembark at Shannon, and they were coming over from the UK on holidays, and he happened to say he was from Leicester. And I said, "Oh, my cousin Joe scored 2 goals for Leicester against Queen's Park Rangers." And he burst out crying. I know, I have to do it. And he said, "You have no idea. I grew up my whole life, my father just saying, 'Oh, you have to see this goal, you have to see this goal.'" And it was before YouTube. So he never saw it. And when there, about 2 years before I was talking to him, he saw the goal for the first time. And he said, "You have no idea." He said, "If I saw the man now, I'd kiss him," he said, "because you have no idea what he did for Leicester City," he said, and the boost he gave, not just the players, but the whole city, you know, of Leicester. That things like that are never forgotten. I think it was a seminal moment, Joe. It wasn't just the goals, which were fantastic, but the commentary, everything.
Yeah.
It was like...
It still gives me goosebumps when I hear it and when I see it, you know. Oh yes, for the youngster, you know, it's like, you only dream about things like that, you know, and then to be fortunate enough that it to happen for you is just unbelievable.
But your dad now, Ned, he was considered, if I'm to listen to my mother, Lord Esther, Ned was considered the best out half in Munster, rugby player. And she always said, if our Ned, she said, was born later, he'd have been traveling the world as well as a soccer player. He was a spectacular soccer player. So it was, and both Uncle Ned and you weren't the tallest of people. But then you look at the likes of Maradona and you think that sometimes players are better smaller because their center of gravity is lower, so their balance is better and their movement is better. And sometimes taller players are afraid of smaller players because they don't know where they are.
Right. Yeah, and I think, you know, that's very true. Smaller players tend to be quicker, more agile, you know, and that's a huge, you know, especially in a game of soccer where the field is so big, it gives you so much room to be able to maneuver in and to pick your place, your spots where you're going to be and position yourself and what have you. And, quickness is really, for most sports, how quick you are dictates how well you're going to do.
Joe, what was the most difficult thing for you when you did actually make because I'm sure, or did you hit the ground running, as they say? Were there things, because in those days you didn't have Ryanair, so you couldn't just hop on a flight for €10 or plus all the expenses that they add on. But you couldn't come as often as you liked to Ireland. And go back. You couldn't come at a weekend and just get a break and come home to Ireland. You nearly had to plan it for months in advance when you were going to come home. How difficult was it for you, or did you just embrace it?
Well, I mean, I knew what it was going over. Obviously, the club had told me, and they'd explained to me. And just like you say, I remember Robbie Keane being at Wolves. And Wolves flying his parents over to watch him make his debut and what have you. And I mean, I'm thinking of my mother and father, that would never even have occurred to people back then. And for me, I knew that I could go home at Christmas and I'd have that. And then once the season was over, I could book my flight and come back for the summer. So I knew that there were that the two opportunities were there available to me. But in between time, it's pretty difficult when you're, well, it's not pretty difficult. It's hard when you up and you're used to a big family being around you, and you have the comforts of home and stuff like that. And then you go to a place where they're all strangers, and you're having to, and not only are they strangers, but they're competitive, where you're all competing for the same things. So there's a certain amount of, rivalry there.
Yeah.
And it I mean, there were nights when I laid in bed and I was pretty homesick, and I shed a few tears because I missed everything about it. I'd left all my family, all my friends behind. I mean, while it was a great adventure, the reality is that you're still competing every day with other people that you have not really been used to. When you go to a place like Leicester City, and it's a top class first division club, and had been, and the level of competition there. I mean, all these guys had played for their national team, schoolboy teams, or certainly in England, they'd either played or they were in the regional teams, which were just as good. And the level of competition every day was huge. And when they brought me over, I think they brought me over in about April of my first season. So I could just get my feet wet, so to speak, and find out what it was like. And I played one game, and then and that was it. I trained the rest of the time, and then the next season I went back over, and again I was trying to find my way, but they believed in me. I mean, I wasn't playing really in games. I was mostly training, and I might be a sub every now and again for the third team, but it wasn't like I went right in and it all fell into place. There were, they would bring other trialists in and they would play them before me. But, I had one real epiphany moment, if you like, where the chief scout, Ray Shaw, who I spoke about the other day as well, he asked me, he approached me on Friday and he said, "Hey, Joe," he said, "would you do me a favor?" He said, "we're having a trial match at Beaver Drive. That's our training ground on Sunday." He said, "We're having two games going on the two fields." And he said, "We're short some players. Would you mind playing?" And I said, "Sure. I love to play because it's a game for me." And I get up there. And all of a sudden, I walk into a dressing room where these guys are looking at you in awe because you've already signed and you've done what these guys are trying to do. And that was kind of interesting in itself. Well, I went out in the game and I started playing, and I was playing like a dervish out there. It was just such a relief to be out and playing again. And by half time, I'd scored 6 goals. And Ray Shaw came to me and he stopped me on the way down and he said, "Joe," he said, "you've got to start passing the ball to the other lads. We know what you can do, son." He said, "You're not here to prove yourself. You're just here to make up the numbers for the other fellas." And I went, "Okay, Uncle Ray," that's what we used to call him. I said, "Okay." So that was it, So from then on, it got better and better. And I went to see Frank O'Farrell one day, and I told him I was kind of homesick, and it was September actually, just before my birthday, and I told him I was homesick, and I was thinking maybe it was time to go back, and because it's not working out for me. And he said to me, "No," he said, "Joe," he said, just give it a break, give it time. It takes time for you to find your feet here. This is a huge step for you." And I said, "Okay." So my birthday was on the 20th of September, and our third team happened to be playing Derby County that day, and I played, and I got in, I played, and I scored in a 4-1 win, and I never looked back after that. And by the end of that season, that was 69. 70, 69, 70, 70, 71, I think it was our first year. But by the end of that season, I was brought up to the reserve team when I was 16. So I made, once I started getting my, my confidence and what have you, then I moved through pretty quickly, and I stayed there in the reserves for a while after that.
What do you think is the reason? I was just thinking while you were talking, because you always stayed very level-headed and very sensible and pragmatic in your life. And I'm thinking of the likes of, say, the great George Best, and that how things went so tragically wrong for him. And do you think that because our family, I suppose, the extension family, your family, was so close, even there was 9 on your father's side of the family, like Auntie Chris, Uncle Jack, or Auntie Chris, my grandmother. There was 9 of them, and every one of them had children who all looked on each other, even though they were first cousins and second cousins, as closer than first cousins and second cousins, because we were always around each other all the time. And children who were supposed to be first cousins were almost like brothers and sisters to each other. Do you think that having that strong family values at home helped you to keep on the straight and narrow, or was there somebody or something over there that actually helped you to stay level? Was it your manager? Was it just an inbuilt sense of, I know who I am and I'm comfortable with who I am, and I have a strong family who I can go home to if things go bad?
Yeah, I mean, that was always, that was always the thing that I knew that if this didn't work out for me, that I had a parachute, and that was home, and I could go home. And one of the things that I learned, and my dad, Ned said this to me very early on, about stuff. We talked about it, and he said to me, he said, "Do you want to be one of the guys that goes over there and just plays in the reserve team and then comes back and plays in the League of Ireland? No respect, no disrespect to the League of Ireland. It was a terrific league." He said, "But there's been a ton of guys that have done that." He said, "Do you want to go over there and have a career?" And I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "I do." He said, "Well, then, you're going to have to, it's going to be hard work for you. You're going to have to pick the right club." And we kind of did that together. And then the conversation got around to being, just remember that who you're going to meet on the way up, you're going to meet them on the way back down again.
Yeah.
So he said, always keep that in your mind. And that was always something. But I never wanted to be anybody other than me.
Yeah.
I mean Joe Waters, who the lads all know me, all my friends from Limerick are still my friends. I was just a lucky one. I was the one that got away and managed to live my dream. But it was never anything about being big-headed or anything like that. That wouldn't be allowed in my family. You'd be,
no,
you'd be told.
You'd be brought down to ground level very,
very, very quickly, very, very quickly. So no, I mean, I was always comfortable in it. I always believed in myself, and that was, that was one of the reasons I left Leicester, really, because I wasn't playing regularly. I was captain of the reserve team there, and I'd be in the first team squad, and then I'd play reserve games midweek, and then I'd be in the first team squad, or I'd play if somebody was injured, or I'd be sub. And then, I got to the stage where, I was getting to be 22, 23, and that's about the time you have to start making your own mark on it. And Leicester at the time, our manager, Jimmy Bloomfield, was a great guy. I mean, and I love Jim. A lot of mercy in him. He passed away from stomach cancer a number of years ago. But I always liked Jim. He was always a great guy. He did well with me. He gave me my chance. But he was a big believer in you can't beat experience. And I remember we played a game against Carlisle. Carlisle were in the first division at the time, and they were doing very well early on. We played them early in the season. I was sub, and we were losing 1-0 to them. And then I came on, and I played very well, and I kind of it changed the course of the game and the outcome. We ended up drawing 1-1, and Jim was in the office after the game, and he says he was, just like coaches talk, and I understand now is, he says, how can a player that you don't regard as in your top 11 come on and make such a difference in a game? And one of the other coaches said, well, maybe, you have to think about him being in the top 11. But then Jim, when he bought players, he'd buy experienced players, guys that had been around for a while. And so when I realized that that's the way it was going, I said, okay, enough's enough. I mean, playing for Leicester City in the first division and being in the Irish squad is all great, but I want a bit more than that.
Yeah. At what stage did you decide that you were going to actually go to the States? Because that's an even bigger step, because you're even further away from home.
Yeah.
Because you had already taken this, you had already spent quite a long time in the UK, and you were still young. Was it easier to actually make the journey to America than it would have been had you actually gone from Ireland to America without going to the UK first? Was it almost like stepping stones you had taken the?
Yeah, it was. And, I mean, don't get me wrong. I had a few offers in England
Yeah.
before I decided I was going to go. Middlesbrough had wanted to sign me. I was on freedom of contract, so I could sign for whoever I wanted. Um, so I went up to Middlesbrough and spoke to Willie Madron, who was the manager up there, and we talked contract there. I went to Wolves. Tommy Docherty was the manager there, and then I went to Derby, where Arthur Cox was the manager. And then I went to Port Vale, where John Rudge was the manager, and he wanted me to be a player coach there. And all of them made, decent offers, but the game was going through a horrible financial crisis at the time. The big clubs were having to sell off a lot of players and make ends meet and what have you. And then this offer came in from the States that just blew the rest of them out of the water. And it, we were already not living at home, so kind of thing. We were in a different place. And then it was, yeah, this could be a great adventure. Let's try it. At least give it a couple of years. We can always come back. Well, we never came back.
How many years are you there now?
I came over in '84. So 94, 2000, 30, 36, 37 years. Yeah.
It's only like yesterday.
It seems like only like yesterday.
And why and you never thought of moving from Seattle? You've always been in Seattle, and then Mark went over with your brother Mark. He went over about 30 years ago?
Yeah, he came over. He actually came over in I think '86. He came over, and we actually live in Tacoma, which is about probably about 30 minutes, depending on traffic, 40 minutes from Seattle. Actually, I'm looking out my window here, and I can see the high rises up in Seattle from here. And where Tacoma is like Seattle. It beautiful place to live. It has a climate like Ireland, pretty much. Very, very similar weather patterns.
Wouldn't you have chosen a place where there was nice sunshine?
Oh, yeah. Well, we do get nice sunshine in the summertime. So Shauna, our youngest daughter, has done that. She's down in San Antonio in Texas.
Oh, good on.
So, yeah, so she made the smart decision. We didn't, but yeah, no, I never wanted to leave the area. Very much like Grimsby, coming to Tacoma. Tacoma is very like, Limerick and Grimsby, very blue collar, hardworking, honest people. That if they see that you're willing to work hard and apply yourself, will take to you. And I found that people embraced me here as well and made it feel like home. So it was very easy to stay here. I mean, an hour and a half from our house here, you can be up in the Cascades and you can be snow skiing. Right outside here, we have the Puget Sound, which is a huge inland body of water. Right 5 minutes walk down the street, we've got a huge park, Point Defiance, that has got trails and it's got a beach and all sorts of things.
And you're
You
near
know,
Bill, you live near your Bill Gates's neighbor.
yeah, yeah. So it's, I mean, it's a fantastic place. They've just on the waterfront just below us, a 5-minute walk down the hill. You have restaurants and parks and music down there in the summertime. So I mean, we live in a city, but it's really a town.
Yeah.
The size of the town is probably 1,000 families, maybe 1,000 people.
Yeah.
And we're surrounded by Tacoma, but we're unique in that we look at ourselves as just Ruston is the name of our city, and we have our own police force. We have, our own. We're an independent city in every way. So, but we're right in the middle of everything.
You're a citizen. You're obviously a citizen now. You have your American passport.
No, I still have an Irish passport. I have a green card, which I renew every 10 years. But I would never give up my Irish. Yeah, no, I'm Irish born and bred. And
that was my next question. That was my next question to you. Did you ever do you consider yourself American, or do you consider yourself Irish? And I couldn't have imagined you considering yourself anything but Irish.
Right. I consider myself Irish American.
Yeah.
Because I was born in Ireland and I live in America. And I just find it difficult when people, when people don't accept the country of their birth as their main country, and then wherever else you're from, you weren't born there. So I'm a big believer that that the country of your birth is the one that you should be most proud of.
Yeah, I understand that, but what was I going to say is it's a pity actually. I don't know. Does America allow you to have dual citizenship? I think it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's the guy explained it to me one day because I was coming through and he said to me, one of the border patrol agents said, "Mr. Waters," said, "why don't you become an American citizen?" And I said, "Well, I said, to be honest, I said I'm Irish, and I said I want to keep my Irish passport." But he says you could have an American passport. He said, and all that happens is, he says, you use your Irish one when you go to Ireland, and we need to see your American one when you come in here. And I said, but doesn't it cost? I looked online, and it costs about $3 or $4 to get a passport. And he says, no. He said, if you do it right, it's only the same price as a green card.
Yeah.
So, I thought about that one, and maybe when my green card comes up again, maybe I'll think about.
A friend of mine, she was buried during the week in Arlington Cemetery, and she was originally from Tipperary, but her husband at the ceremony in their house, it was recorded and on YouTube, and he was talking about how he was a colonel with the American Army, and he was in Vietnam and that, but he was talking about having the diplomatic passport, having her Irish passport, and her having her American. And she was saying when they were going to certain danger zones and that, I'm telling you now, if I get into trouble, I'm burning this passport. It's going to be hidden somewhere. She said, I have an Irish passport. They won't touch the Irish. Is what she said.
That's very true. That's very true.
Around with all the passports, the diplomatic and the Irish,
yeah.
and depending on which one she needed to get into. But if she saw any danger at all in an area, the Irish passport was used.
Oh yeah, that's like the story of the fella that the time that there was trouble in Yugoslavia when the breakup was.
Yeah.
And they rounded up this group of people and they were going to shoot them, you know. And one guy is wearing a Real Madrid jersey with they had a Mexican forward playing for them at the time. I forget his name now. But the lieutenant, whoever was in charge, looked at him and he said, Sanchez, I think it was. And he said, Hugo Sanchez? He said, yeah. He said, oh, you can go. And he sent him away. It was like saved his life. So it's, sometimes it's little things. And I'm the same way. If ever I'm anywhere and I show my Irish passport and that's it. And if they think you're anything other, then no, it'll get you out of a lot of binds. Sure.
That's the one thing that the Irish have is the passport. That's the safe passport. But Joe, where to from now? I mean, you're still involved in the coaching in the States. By the way, say hello to Ned and Lord say hello to Uncle Gerard and Nancy Waters and all your family in Ireland.
Yes, I said Tina texted me the other day or messaged me, and young Ger messages me as well. So hello, Uncle Ger, Nancy, how are you doing?
And
sending
Muriel,
you all love from over here.
And Muriel and all of them, Teresa,
and all the rest of them.
All the rest of them. But what's next now for you?
Well, now, actually, you just touched on something there. And I just told the girls yesterday, I've actually retired from coaching. I just did it this last week. And there's just so many things happening and, things that I want to do and new commitments. Shauna is pregnant and she's going to be having a baby here and they're going to be down in San Antonio. So I want to be able to go down and do that. I've got, some reunions coming up for our third division championship team, and I want to be able to do that. And I've missed a lot of stuff because, with coaching in the autumn and in the spring, a lot of stuff goes on at those times. So I've kind of missed out. And I've had 39 years at the school. I've been lucky that it's been a very successful. Both the boys and the girls have been very successful programs and have done very well. And I hope we'll continue to do that with the new coaches. But it's time for me to hang it up and let somebody else have a go at it and enjoy doing it.
Well,
and
you can take the boy out of soccer, but can you take the soccer out of the boy?
Well, no, you can't, and that's the thing with it. But the beauty of it is, as I'm speaking to you, I've got the Euros on over my right shoulder here. So
you need to say you're watching the Euros while you're talking.
Yeah. No,
but you know what I'm thinking of? I was looking there while you were at one stage, the Nadal Djokovic match in tennis. I'm a Nadal fanatic. And Teresa, your sister was a great squash player. She played for De Beers.
Yes.
Do you know? So sport. And Dermot played for Richmond's in rugby. So sport was it's in your genes. So it's not. I don't think you'll retire fully, Joe. I think you'll have to be at the matches having an input. You mightn't be involved, but you'll be there.
Oh, I still have the interest in it because, and the coaches that are taking over for me are all good friends of mine because, I brought them on and what have you. And so that part of it will never go away. But, it's a funny thing that you're talking about there. In our family, sometimes myself and Dermot are a blessing and we're a curse. Because all our siblings ever hear about is the two of us and what have you. And my nephew Jeffrey was out one night, and he was out somewhere, and he got talking to this fella, and he says they introduced themselves, and the fella says to him, he says, Waters. He said, are you related to the Waters, the soccer people? He said, yeah. And Jeffrey goes, oh yeah, here we go. No, I have to listen to them. So the fella says, oh yeah, he says, two fine players, them, two fine players. Never see the likes of them. And he says, Jeffrey is waiting and waiting. He says, yeah, those two girls, they were great soccer players. He was talking about Teresa and Beth. The other two never got a mention. Jeff loved that one for the rest of his life.
And Lorraine Waters, John Waters' daughter, was mad into the soccer as well.
Yes.
And we were even saying she was better than than that Waters side of the boys in John's family. It was Lorraine was the soccer player, and we were all saying she'll be the next Joe Waters, you know, playing for Ireland. But Joe, it's been a pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you,
Is there
Mary.
anything you'd like to say before we finish up?
No, just hello to everybody, and I'm so looking forward to this thing being put behind us so that I can get back home again. It's just, you know, this has just been a nightmare. Luckily enough, things are starting to open up. Sue and I are going down to Mexico on the 23rd of June. We're going down there to celebrate Kelly's 40th birthday. So the whole family is going down. So finally we're getting back to doing some traveling, and I can't wait for it to open up back home again, and so I can get back and just visit. I love going home, and I call it home. You know, when you're born in Bedford Row and you live in the Pike, and then you move to Garryowen, you know, you're a Limerick man, and that's it. And you know, everything starts with you being, you know, you're a Pike man, you're a Limerick man, then you're a Munster man, and then you're an Irishman. And in that order, you discover the importance of it all. But it all goes back down to being where you were born and where you were brought up. And I just love going back.
Irish by birth, a Pike, grace of God.
Yeah. So, yeah. But Mary, you should tell them sometime about the house that we grew up in. Because you were in the Pike house as well, weren't you?
I do, but I don't remember it very much. Do you know the only memory I have actually of it? And you know, you laugh at me. I have two memories. I have the memories of a goat coming in one day, and I was very young because I came home when I was 5 from England. And I must have been around that age. And there was a goat in the room, and I know because it was the same height as me, because I can remember that I went over to the goat, and he walked in, and I'm thinking, how did a goat come in to our house in the Pike? And the second memory I have is that my mum and your dad, I think, went to mass, and those days you could leave children at home, and she left me inside in the house with the door locked, and the Kellys across the road in the pub, or the Kelly's house, they were keeping an eye on me. But I opened the latch, climbed in a chair, opened the latch, and ran across to the Kellys, and they minded me until I got home. They're the only two memories I have of the.
Really? No, I have a few memories of I have a good few memories of the Pike and the house itself. I don't know if you know, but that house was the only house in the whole row of the cottages there that had running water in the backyard. It had a tap in the backyard.
We were posh, Joe. We had running water.
Oh yeah. And then it had gas as well. Remember the little kitchen that was there? Just as you went out the back door, it was off. You used to be off to the right,
I do
and
know vaguely.
yeah, and there was a little gas stove in there, and the man that lived in it before we got into it worked for the corporation, so he was able to put it in. So everybody else had to go up by the Munster Tavern where the old water, the hand pump used to be, and take their buckets up there and fill them up there. You know, I remember my mother, there used to be stones thrown over the wall from the mental hospital at the back of us, right? And there was a fella named PJ Murphy was his name. I'll never forget it. And he was a patient in the hospital, and he would come and he'd throw a rock over from time to time. We'd hear it, and the mother would go out, and he'd be there, and he'd have a jug in his hand, right? And the mother would put a rope down, and he'd put money in the jug, and he'd tie it onto the rope, and the mother would go across the Ryan's bar on the corner there, and she'd get him a pint of Guinness in it, and then she'd take it back and lower it back down to him with his change.
And my grandmother, Catherine Liston, she used to have a little shop, I was told, right. And she used to sell meat from Clover Meats, and she used to sell cigarettes and everything like that. And what she would do would be she'd break the cigarettes in half.
Yeah.
Woodbine, I think. She never smoked or drank in her life, but she used to break them in half. And in the morning time, she'd stand up on the wall beside her house, and she'd hand a cigarette down to the patients who'd walk over to the wall, and then she'd give them the other cigarette later on. And she did. I don't think she made a penny out of it, but she used to be supplying the patients. But
oh yeah,
playing there. I used to play in there with the patients. We used to go over and sit inside in the little. There was a shed, and myself and Anne Redden and Ger Mullally and Gabriel Mullally, all of us used to go over in a group, and we'd sit and talk to the patients, and
right.
We were never afraid of them.
No, and I mean we'd be the same, because I think that shed that you're talking about, was that over by the tennis courts?
I don't remember.
There was a garden over there, and there was tennis courts there at one time. I remember they had the big field that was there, the Gaelic field, soccer field, whatever, for patients and what have you. So yeah, I mean, we used to go there as kids. We used to get in there all the time. You know, it wasn't unusual at all, and there was never anything.
Dance with them at Christmas. We'd put on concerts, and we'd go in and we'd hand out sweets and everything, and they were in our backyard.
Yeah.
Joe. They were. I mean, every one of those houses, if you look at it, when you think back on it, they were all either Listons. In some way, they were either all your mother's, my grandmother's, your grandmother's side of the family all lived down there. Everyone was either related or married to somebody within the family.
Yeah.
The families down that row of houses, and then they moved across to either where I am now or Singleton Crescent. So everybody more or less stayed together, and that's why. We're all in St. Lawrence Park in particular, we're such a close-knit little cul-de-sac where I live, because you had all the Listons and the Waters and us all living in that cul-de-sac at one stage, you know, and now there's just Nancy and Ger. They're the only couple left in St. Lawrence Park. You know, it's just...
It's amazing, you know, what that whole community just used to be like. You know, I mean, I remember the Fitzes lived next door to us when I was growing up, and they came from farming, and they would have chickens in the backyard, and the chickens used to come over into our yard, and the deal was, if the chickens came over and laid any eggs in, and in 1950s Ireland, getting eggs was like, it was like gold. You know, you asked anybody for anything, that the next thing they'd say to you, or the next thing you'd be wanting is the egg. You know, you could ask them for money and have more of a chance to get it than an
My
egg.
mother used to always talk about the fact that you'd come in and she'd say, Joe, will you have a slice of bread or whatever, a bun or whatever? And you'd say, I will, Meyer, and Dermot will, and Der will have one too. And she's just saying, you'd swear I was going to leave Dermot out. But every time Joe, you'd ask Joe, will you have a cup of tea? Joe, will you? And Der will have one too. You know, I just remember that. It's just
no, I have fond memories. Margaret, Madeline McCarthy and Carmel Clancy. Right, they lived up there, and the girls were all in their teens and what have you, and they're, you know, there wasn't really much for them to do. So all the kids that were able to go to school would, the girls would walk them down to St. John's, and then the girls would come back. Well, the mother had three of us at the time, myself, Dermot, and Teresa, and so she'd ask the girls if they'd take me with them to get me out of the way for a while. So they took me down anyway, and I was like 3.5 at the time, 3.5. And one day anyway, the mother started getting worried because I hadn't come back home. So she goes up to Madeline McCarthy's house, and she says, Madeline, she says, where's Joe? He didn't come home. And she says, oh, Bernie, he liked it so much there, I left him there. And I was stuck in school for the rest of my life. So from being 3.5, I went in there and never came back out. So that was how I got started in school. But that, I mean, that's the way it was in those days, you know.
Yeah, and
we're doing that now.
I mean, Madeline's sister, Breda McCarthy, Breda Hanley, Tony Hanley, all of them. I mean, that's why I think the Pike Rovers bus crash at the time was so, had such an impact as well. It wasn't just a soccer team that was involved. It was an entire community. Everybody was either related or friends since they were children, or their parents. They and their parents were friends with, you know, and their grandparents. So there was generations of people impacted with the crash. And I mean, I was supposed to be on the bus that night but I was in Bunratty Castle at the time, and I asked for the night off, and they wouldn't give it to me that night because it was really busy. And Mom said, I won't bother going so on the bus. And you know, and it had a devastating effect on people, because everybody was still so close together because they were still so involved in the club. Even though the Pike no longer existed as an area, we still consider ourselves Pike people because we're in St. Lawrence Park, which is, I mean, I can see from my back bedroom window, I can see the Pike. I have the foundations of the Pike inside my back garden as a rockery.
Yeah.
And I can see my parents' grave from my back bedroom window. So it's just, everything is, you're still tied up in the whole community that you were brought up in. Do you know?
Oh, I mean, hugely. I mean, you know, when we were talking to Pat the other day, he's asking, are you a Pike man? You know, when you're brought up like I was, every Sunday, Ned would take myself and Dermot when Pike were playing. Every Sunday, wherever it was, whether it was Shelburne Park or Cal's Park or the Borough or wherever it was, if they were around at the time. And we'd go and we'd watch the Pike. Every time they played an FAI Cup match up in Dublin, we'd be on the train on the way up there, and then you'd stop at the Limerick Junction, and the lads would go across. It was a Sunday, and and then we'd ride in the milk carriage on the way back for the sing song, and that's how we, you know, that's how we grew up, you know, and that's what's ingrained in us, because all those guys, you know, the likes of Brian O'Brien, Brian Hanrahan, uh, Paul Croak, uh, Craig Bennis, you know, you go to John O'Brien, Eddie Donovan, Paddy Casey, all those fellas were all my heroes, you know, growing up. I mean, and
Ger Frawley.
Yeah, Ger Frawley as well. Ger played with Dad in the 48 FEI Junior Cup final up in Dublin. And, you know, I mean, all the lads I used to run it, you know, I knew all these men just by being with Dad every Sunday, you know.
Yeah. And there's no reason why we should have known these people, because they were so many years older than you. They were and me, and then but you just and some of them lived through folklore, because my mother was always like an Anthony, your uncle. He'd come in and they'd be chatting about the pike, and they'd be chatting about people that were dead long before they were even born, because they learned it from my grandmother and from your grandfather. They'd have learned it, you know, and they were just, it's just, I suppose, a community that's, no matter where you'd go in the world, you're still part of that community.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right, you know. So, I mean, as a kid, you were probably in everybody's house in the Pike at some point.
Everyone.
Yeah, everyone. I mean, you know,
whether they wanted you or not.
Right, exactly. You were there, and that was it. You know, I mean, I see Michael McCarthy, and I see post on him, you know, on the anniversary and what have you. But I remember being in his house numerous times, and when his dad was
in the team.
Yeah, when he had when he got sick with the gangrene that time, and it's, you know, and Mick was a huge pike man, you know, the father, huge pike man, you know, and eventually he could get around.
Apparently, he used to pick the teams, Mammy said, inside his bed, and they'd all stand at the window and look in, and they'd say, "Well, Carty, am I playing?" He'd be picking the teams inside in the bedroom. Don't know if that's true, but Mammy used to always say it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, they used to have the committee meetings up there. Yeah.
Breda Hanley is still a, you know, I mean, Mam was a treasurer with Breda for a long time of the ladies committee, but Breda is the person to go to now when you want to know anything about anyone in the club, or any, you know, if you have photographs and you want to know who's that, Breda, she loves photographs, you know, and
the club historian now, huh?
Great woman for the photographs. So is Brian O'Brien, but he won't come on to talk to me. He's shy. He'll write anything about the club, but he won't come on and talk.
That's and you know, that's a name that I left out there. Brian O'Brien was, Dad absolutely loved Brian O'Brien. He thought he was the finest player he ever saw. And I had my boys' soccer team at home for Easter, and we were going. It was on Easter Saturday, and we were going to mass on Easter Saturday, and we were going to do it up at the Redemptorists, but they had changed the time of it to the evening, and we were trying to do it in the afternoon, and so we went to the church that is the next closest one to them. It's just down from the Tech. What church is that one? The old technical college, Limerick Technical.
The Jesuits on the left. Yeah.
It's on the right hand side as you're going down into town. And
it's not the Franciscans. It's the
no. Franciscans is more in town. This one is a little bit further up. It's past the monument.
Yeah, I know the one. The Jesuits is on the left. The Franciscans is down further, and the Augustinians is on the right at the bottom of Mulgrave or William Street. Can't think of what that's called, that church now.
I think there was the one that I think that's the one that Frank McCourt was talking about in Angela's Ashes that
It would
they
be.
used to get.
It would be because he's only 100 yards, or the school he went to, Leamy.
Yeah.
Leamy House is just around the corner from that church.
Yeah, but we were there anyway, and we were going to mass. So we finally found out that there was going to be mass at this church starting at 3:00. So we got back on the bus and went down and made it. And Brian O'Brien was in one of the pews, and as I was sitting there, I was sitting parallel to the altar, and the Bishop of Limerick was actually saying the mass that day. So, and as I looked around, I saw Brian sitting there, and we got talking. You know, I told him, introduced myself, and told him who I was, and we got talking. And he came on the bus and spoke to the boys for a little bit and what have you. But yeah, I mean, he wrote a great obituary piece for Dad in the paper.
St. Joseph. I just checked it, Joe. St. Joseph's Church.
I thought it was St. Joseph's. That's what I didn't want to say it, but I thought it was. Yeah. So yeah. I mean, Brian, and a lovely man. I mean, just a lovely man.
An absolute a saint of a man, and I don't say that lightly. A saint of a man, yeah. But he would come on to talk to me. He said, "Mary, I will write forever about Pike, but don't ask me to talk." So I said, "What am I going to do?" But anyway, I got Joe Waters. Yeah. So, Joe, thank you very much for being my guest today, or for chatting to me. Not really guest.
Well, it's my pleasure.
And say hello to Sue for me and all the girls. And
I will. And actually, you know what I did the last time, and Sue nearly killed me, because I talked about Kelly, I talked about Lindley, I talked about Shauna and Shauna's baby, and I neglected to talk about my grandson Balin, who is just turning into his teenage years right now. And his mother is just beginning to realize what paybacks are. So
it always comes.
Yeah, she told me the other day, she says, well, he's becoming a typical teenager and this and that and the other. And I said, you know what? Paybacks are terrible.
You probably don't for all the years. Wait till you're a mother and you'll know how you're preventing us.
Exactly. So
thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Mary. Take care.
That's the end of the show for today. Until the next time, Lacuna of Day. But Wallam to Galer, Chiacona, Sonus Agus Gra, Agus Gadeshiv Sloan. That's my bit of Irish over, Joe. Just to get the Irish in.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.